You know, your brain is kind of a storyteller. But here's the thing. It's not always telling you the complete truth. Today, we're diving into the fading affect bias, this invisible positivity filter that's constantly and quietly rewriting your personal history.
I mean, really think about it. That totally embarrassing thing that happened in high school, it probably doesn't sting quite the same way anymore. But the memory of a really great accomplishment, that can still make you smile, right? So what's going on here? Well, it turns out it's not just you. It's actually a fundamental feature of how human memory works.
Okay, so this built-in filter, this thing that's working in the background, it actually has a name, and getting a handle on it is pretty key to understanding how we all stay on an even keel. Yeah, it's called the fading affect bias, or FAB for short. And honestly, it's the perfect answer to that question we started with. It's this built-in cognitive bias that just makes sure that over time, our past feels a little bit brighter than it might have actually been.
Now, this is a really important point to get. The fading affect bias doesn't just delete the memory itself. You still remember the facts, the details, what went down. What fades is the affect, the emotional sting or that warm glow connected to the memory. So that criticism you got loses its bite. But a genuine compliment, that keeps its warmth.
And get this isn't just some quirk for optimists or specific cultures. Research shows this bias is pretty much universal, all across the globe. What's really fascinating is that it actually gets stronger as we get older, helping us build a more positive life story over the long haul.
Okay, so this all sounds good, but how do we know it's real? I mean, is it just wishful thinking? Let's dig into the science that actually uncovered this subtle but really powerful bias.
Well, believe it or not, the clues have been piling up for almost 100 years. It started way back in 1932, when some of the first studies noticed that people seemed to recall positive emotions with way more intensity. Then, by 1970, the research got a lot more objective. They started using diary studies to track feelings as they happened. And finally, in the late 90s, a team led by Walker really solidified the whole concept, proving that, yeah, the feelings from good times just plain last longer than the feelings from bad times.
And this chart, it just lays it all out so clearly. There was this big study back in 2009 where researchers looked at over 1,200 personal memories. And what they found was that, on average, the emotional punch of negative memories faded by more than half. For positive memories, it was only about a third. That difference right there, that is the fading affect bias in action.
And this bias isn't just for our personal stuff. It even works on what we call flashbulb memories. You know, those super vivid memories of big public events. A perfect example is the fall of the Berlin Wall. When researchers checked in with people years later, they found that those initial positive feelings still going strong, but any of the negative or anxious feelings people had at the time, they had faded a lot, leaving behind this much more positive collective memory of the event.
But, and this is a big but, this positivity filter isn't perfect. It's not foolproof. There are certain psychological states and even personality traits that can mess with it, basically leaving the emotional volume on those negative memories cranked way up.
A lot of it comes down to our mental state. For instance, high anxiety seems to lock in the emotional intensity of all memories, good and bad. With depression, the bias can get all out of whack or even flip, where the negative feelings are the ones that stick around longer. And then you have narcissism, where the effect is kind of weak, unless, surprise, surprise, the memory is all about them.
So, okay, if some things can weaken this bias, is there anything we can do to, strengthen it? You bet. And the key, as this quote points out, is all about sharing. Talking about our memories with someone who's supportive actually helps our brain process and reframe things, which helps fade those negative emotions. But just replaying events over and over in your own head, psychologists call that self-rehearsal. That can actually keep those negative feelings fresh. It's the social connection that really makes the difference.
Which brings us to a big question. If our brain is basically editing our past to look better, what's the point? I mean, why would we have evolved this feature that seems to, distort reality?
Well, it turns out the fading affect bias is seen as this incredibly useful adaptive tool. For starters, it helps us build a more positive story about ourselves, which is huge for self-esteem. Second, by turning down the volume on past hurts, it helps us manage our emotions right here in the present. And third, by making the past seem pretty good overall, it encourages us to be open to new things instead of being held back by fear of past failures.
So at the end of the day,
The fading affect bias isn't some bug in our programming. It's a feature. It's actually a sign of a healthy mind working the way it's supposed to. It's the subtle, constant process that helps us learn from our past without being emotionally buried by it, letting us move forward with a more optimistic and resilient outlook.
So next time you're looking back on your life, just remember there's this little invisible editor at work, quietly tweaking your emotional script for the better. So I'll leave you with this. Now that you know it's there, how does that change how you see your own story?